Hey guys, wow, you're sitting under string lights in a warm Southern California backyard. A Dora the Explorer piñata hangs crooked in the tree. Music spills from a Bluetooth speaker. Parents sip soda from red cups. A 3-year-old named Isabela squeals as her uncle lifts her onto a trampoline. It's late afternoon, and the smell of carne asada drifts in the air. Then, boom! A thunderclap not from the sky but from behind the house. You drop your drink. People scream. Smoke clouds the yard. Kids run. Then the shouting starts. Foreign voices, tactical gear, guns drawn. You hit the ground. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not now. But you're watching it in real time. ICE agents in riot gear pour into the backyard. A flashbang grenade had been tossed near the gate. Standard entry protocol, they'll later say. Standard procedure? You rub your eyes. One toddler has a gash on her leg from flying debris. Her grandfather, mid-bite into a taco, is now face down on the ground with a boot on his back. You see Maria, the birthday girl's mother, grabbing at the agents, crying, "Por favor, the kids, please, the kids!" No one listens. Her husband, Victor, is cuffed and dragged through the fence. The cake is still on the table. Nobody sings happy birthday. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments, because this happened in a zip code just like yours. Summary, inspirational, call to action, and let's go on the journey of today's story together. You don't know it yet, but this wasn't a rogue unit or mistake. It was part of a strategic sweep dubbed Operation Cross-Check, where ICE targets high-priority removals, but somehow manages to leave behind traumatized children, birthday balloons floating through tear gas. Operation Cross-Check. That's what ICE called it. A benign-sounding phrase that suggests a little bureaucratic double-checking, like a teacher grading a quiz. But behind the curtain, it was something else entirely. A multi-city enforcement surge spanning 5 states over 4 weeks in 2024. You read the official ICE statement. Operation Cross-Check is designed to identify and apprehend priority non-citizens, and you wonder how priority includes a dad grilling carne asada in a backyard while his daughter waits to cut her cake. According to February 2024 press release from ICE.gov, the operation focused on individuals with final orders of removal who pose a public safety threat. But local immigrant advocacy groups, including Sherla and the ACLU of Southern California, began to notice a pattern. Home raids at dawn, community centers monitored, and in one bizarre case, an ICE van stationed across from a school bus stop. You can't unsee that image. A mother standing frozen on the sidewalk, one hand on her child's backpack, the other gripping her green card. During this surge, ICE claimed 2,141 arrests nationwide. But Track's recent data analysis reveals something the agency's press releases don't. Nearly 42% of those arrested had no criminal record at all, not even a traffic ticket. In Southern California alone, ICE logged over 300 collateral arrests, meaning people who were picked up simply because they were nearby. Like Victor, Maria's husband, who wasn't even the target of the birthday party raid. The actual subject had moved out 6 months earlier. Wired's security section reported that new enforcement tech was quietly deployed during the sweep. AI-enhanced facial recognition scanned community event photos for undocumented faces. One ICE agent, speaking anonymously, called it a social media dragnet with boots. In that context, even a birthday party becomes a data point, a digital breadcrumb, a potential target. So while officials insisted this was about law and order, what played out on the ground felt more like chaos dressed in body armor. A system not just executing policy, but making people disappear amid celebration and cake. Maria doesn't remember the sound the flashbang made. Not exactly. She just remembers the smell. The bitter smoke hanging thick over her daughter's pink tablecloth. One moment she was handing out juice boxes. The next, she was dragging her screaming toddler under the bounce house tarp, shielding her from boots and shouting. You see it all in blurry pieces. Plastic forks flying, someone's sandals left behind, a man yelling in English, another moaning in Spanish. And Victor, her husband, bleeding from a cut on his eyebrow, handcuffed with his face in the grass. They had spent weeks planning this party. It was Isabela's 3rd birthday, Dora the Explorer theme. Maria had baked cupcakes with pink frosting and tiny candy backpacks. Her neighbor brought over a clown. Victor set up folding tables under the jacaranda tree. The whole street was invited. Family, neighbors, people from church, people with and without papers. And that's probably why they came. ICE later claimed they were looking for a 28-year-old man suspected of assault who may have been residing at the address. But Maria showed them proof. The man hadn't lived there in over 6 months. They ignored her. What they did take was Victor, who had 2 prior deportation orders, both from over a decade ago. One of them stemmed from a workplace raid where he was never charged but never returned to court. It didn't matter that he'd built a family, worked construction jobs under his ITN, paid taxes, volunteered at his daughter's preschool. When they threw the flashbang, one little girl, Maria's niece, got a burn on her calf from the hot metal casing. Another child wet himself behind the garden shed and wouldn't speak for hours. The clown left through the side gate and never came back. Maria kept screaming in Spanglish, hands in the air, begging someone to tell her what law had just been broken by balloons, carne asada, and kids in party hats. Social media lit up that night. Cell phone video from a cousin showed agents swarming through party decorations, one even knocking over the birthday cake. ICE responded via X, formerly Twitter, writing, "Our teams acted in accordance with national protocol." So now you sit there, stunned, wondering how many times this has happened and how often it's buried under jargon like standard field protocol. Because the numbers don't lie, even if the press releases try to. According to Track Immigration, there were over 1,170 collateral arrests during ICE operations between January and May 2024. Of those, nearly 65% had no prior criminal convictions, not violent, not gang-affiliated, not even flagged by the courts, just present, just near the target. You think of Victor, tall, quiet, always smiling in the school pickup line. A man whose name isn't on any watch list, whose crime was forgetting to show up at a 2011 immigration court date because his notice was mailed to the wrong address, and that makes him fair game. Digging deeper, a New York Times article published April 2024 revealed that internal memos from ICE's Enforcement and Removal Operations Unit had quietly expanded the definition of target vicinity to include adjacent structures and visible associates. Meaning, if you're in the backyard, even holding a juice box, you might as well be holding a warrant. And that flashbang? According to ICE.gov, flash diversionary devices are authorized for entry into enclosed spaces where officer safety is potentially compromised. But this wasn't a drug lab. This was a barbecue. The ACLU filed a formal complaint, citing evidence from paramedics showing that one of the children suffered temporary hearing loss. Yet no agent was disciplined. No report was publicly released. Meanwhile, ICE's official X account reposted a clip from conservative media praising the firm's stance on law enforcement, even as the birthday party footage, shared by ProPublica Viral, showing Dora the Explorer balloons floating through clouds of smoke. You realize this isn't about the law anymore. It's about narrative control. ICE says they're keeping you safe. But from who? A clown? A cake? A dad in a Dodgers hat flipping tortillas? Facts can feel like fists, cold, direct, and sometimes just as brutal. Because in the war for data, emotion is always collateral. You try to weigh it, the ethics of it. Was it legal? Maybe. But was it right? That's the question that keeps pulling at you like a loose thread. ICE defenders say enforcement isn't pretty. They cite sovereignty, law and order, deterrence. They point out Victor's prior deportation orders, the lawful authority of the agents, and that no one was killed. A few birthday balloons and some scared kids? Regrettable, yes, but necessary, they argue. In a world of borders, someone has to draw the line. But you've seen the line, and it's jagged, and it moves. On the other side of the debate, you hear voices from groups like the ACLU and Human Rights Watch, and even from inside law enforcement itself. A retired DHS agent, quoted in a piece by The Guardian, called the raid a tactical overreach for a nonviolent administrative target. He added, "We used to knock, now we kick." And that speaks volumes. It's not just about what was done, but how. The clown wasn't a threat. The kids weren't accomplices. The bounce house didn't require breaching protocol. And yet all of it was treated like hostile terrain. Why? because someone at ICE decided that proximity to a suspect was now probable cause for chaos. You can't ignore the leaked ICE training slides published by ProPublica. One of them shows a flowchart labeled Engage with Presence. Under it, bullet points: intimidation through velocity, control the narrative early, and do not debrief on site. These are not public safety strategies. These are psychological tactics, and they're being used in neighborhoods like yours. There's something eerie about an agency that films raids for internal morale videos but redacts injury reports. Something deeply wrong when legal authority becomes theater, designed not just to detain but to send a message. You are not safe here. And so the ethical line blurs. What do you call a law that punishes presence? A country that wages war on piñatas? A system where a child's laughter can summon sirens? It's not just immigration policy, it's performance. And the audience? That's us. In the weeks after the raid, the street gets quiet. Not just normal quiet, hollow, like something has been scraped out of the neighborhood's chest and never put back. Maria still hosts her sister for coffee on Saturdays, but now the curtains stay drawn. The bounce house was never taken down. It just deflated over time, sagging to the lawn like an abandoned promise. You hear stories. A boy down the block starts wetting the bed again. A neighbor installs floodlights and a fake camera on his garage. Maria's daughter, Isabela, wakes up screaming some nights. Loud noises, sirens, fireworks, the blender set her off. She flinches when men raise their voices. She won't wear party hats anymore. One neighbor, Jose, used to run a small landscaping business. He disappears 2 days after the raid. No one knows if he was taken or if he fled. Another family sends their kids to live with cousins in San Diego until things cool down. But things don't cool down. They calcify, turn into tension. A kind of emotional curfew settles over the block. The emotional trauma isn't abstract, it's medical. According to a report by the Migration Policy Institute, children exposed to immigration enforcement raids show increased rates of PTSD, depression, and school dropout. Maria takes Isabela to a child therapist who suggests drawing exercises. In one, Isabela colors the party scene, but the people have no faces, just floating hands, some with guns. Meanwhile, ICE stays silent. There's no community outreach, no apology, no correction, just the usual talking points. We operate under strict policy guidelines. But those policies don't bandage a burn. They don't tuck in a child afraid of bedtime. And they certainly don't tell Maria how to answer when Isabela asks, "Is Daddy coming home for my next birthday?" A local pastor tries to organize a candlelight vigil. Only 12 people show up. Half of them don't bring candles, just silent eyes, darting toward any dark sedan that might be watching. The pastor's voice shakes as he reads Psalm 23, but the kids are too young to understand it, and the adults are too tired to believe it. You lie awake some nights thinking about lines, the kind we draw in sand, in laws, in hearts. At what point does enforcement become cruelty? At what point does a badge lose its moral weight? You replay the birthday raid in your mind like a bad movie. Each time you imagine someone, just one agent, pausing to say, "Wait, there are kids here." But no one did. And maybe that's the scariest part. In ICE's worldview, the mission is clear. Enforce immigration law, remove those deemed unlawful, and act in the interest of national security. But what kind of security is preserved by leaving children sobbing in backyards, by turning birthday songs into screams? Even some inside the system are asking questions. In an anonymous op-ed published on The Independent, a former ICE field supervisor confessed to resigning after watching our team treat a family gathering like a battlefield. He wrote, "I didn't join law enforcement to terrify children." That line sticks with you. It loops in your brain like the chorus of a sad song. There's also something else you can't shake, a phrase from an old immigrant woman, quoted in a Cal Matters interview. "We obey the rules, but the rules shift like shadows." She had lived in the U.S. for 27 years, paid taxes, raised 3 kids, but no path to papers. The laws changed midstream. The goalposts moved. The shadow lengthened. You start to see the pattern. A system more invested in punishment than process, in optics over outcome. A system where birthdays become battlegrounds and innocence gets traded for intimidation. Where law is no longer a guide, but a hammer. And yet, despite it all, people still throw parties. They still buy balloons. Because resisting fear is sometimes as simple as baking cupcakes and setting up chairs. You start to realize that justice isn't always a courtroom victory. It's the quiet insistence on joy, even in danger. It's the bounce house still rolled up in Maria's garage, waiting for safer days. Where justice ends and fear begins isn't written in law books. It's written in the silence after a raid, in the faces of children too young to know they've already been judged. Now you're sitting with it, the weight of it. You scroll through the videos again, shaky phone footage, smoke curling through pink streamers, a child holding a balloon as a line of agents marches past. You want to look away. You don't. You can't. Because once you've seen a birthday party turned into a raid, you start seeing the pattern everywhere. You realize this wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice to treat proximity like guilt, a choice to use military tools on families, a choice to call a father flipping tortillas a threat. And once that choice is made, it shapes everything: the laws, the policies, the people in helmets shouting orders in a language not everyone in the yard could even understand. You wonder, what would have happened if Maria hadn't been recording? If no one had posted the video? If ICE hadn't been publicly called out by civil rights groups, journalists, and a few brave members of Congress? Would the story have faded, as so many do, into the bureaucratic fog of standard enforcement? Would it have mattered at all? That's the question. That's why stories like this need oxygen. Because this isn't just about one raid. This is about how fear metastasizes, how people start skipping doctor visits, parent-teacher conferences, church gatherings, how joy becomes a liability, how even a child's birthday becomes suspect. So now I ask you, not as a narrator but as a neighbor, if this happened on your block, would you speak up? If your child came home asking what ICE means, would you explain? And if a piñata on your lawn drew armored vans, would you still believe in liberty and justice for all? This isn't a story. It's a mirror. And maybe it's time to stop flinching. If this story moved you, share it. If it unsettled you, sit with it. If it sparks something, speak it. Because silence is the softest weapon and the most effective. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there will hear you and decide that next time, the clown gets to finish the show. Now, take a deep breath. Let the images drift away for a moment. The smoke, the shouting, the overturned cake. Let the streetlights glow softly again in your mind. Imagine the bounce house fully inflated, children laughing, not flinching. Imagine Maria back in her kitchen, frosting a cake in peace. No fear, no noise, just stillness. Stories like this are hard. They're supposed to be. They remind us of who we are when no one is watching, of the choices made in our name, of the humanity caught between laws and lives. But you listened, you stayed with it. And that matters, because the way we treat people on the margins, on their birthdays, in their backyards, in their silence, is a reflection of our deepest values. Not slogans, not hashtags, but actions. Real, messy, human actions. Maybe tonight you'll think a little longer about the immigrant dad at your child's school. Maybe you'll check in on your neighbor. Maybe you'll just remember that some families pray every day for the simple chance to exist without fear.